Good morning. The first item of business is general questions. Question number 1, Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the European Commission regarding the food and drink sector.
Cabinet Secretary Richard Lochhead.
I do regularly take the opportunity, whilst attending Council of Ministers meetings in Brussels, to promote to the Commission and indeed others Scotland's fantastic food and drink industry and the growth that it's enjoyed over the past few years.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Would the Cabinet Secretary care to give an opinion on the package of measures which were recently adopted by the EC to strengthen the regulations surrounding food consumption in the EEC?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do, of course, warmly welcome the Commission's proposals to strengthen the regulatory controls on country of origin labelling, which is what the member is referring to. That will, of course, enable our food and drink sector in Scotland to make sure everyone is aware of its provenance and quality credentials, which more and more consumers are looking for in this country and throughout Europe. And, of course, there are other issues as part of these discussions in Brussels which we are paying close attention to, such as extending country of origin labelling to processed products, which is clearly a very topical issue. And again, the Scottish Government will be making our views known as we want to see proportionate but certainly an extension of country of origin labelling.
Jamie McGregor.
Thank you. What support is available for small-scale food and drink producers in Scotland who wish to begin exporting to the EU and elsewhere?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, it's a very good question that Jamie McGregor raises, because there are many, particularly new small food and drink producers in Scotland who are either already successfully beginning to export or who wish to do that. And we're working closely with Scottish Development International and the other bodies such as Scotland Food and Drink to ensure that relevant support is made available. And I had a meeting recently with small producers in Arran, and it was very exciting to hear about their ambitious projects to work together, which is certainly one way to do this. If small producers work together, they can perhaps bring together the resources a bigger producer may have, and then have an overseas presence to get into new markets. And that's something we are also wanting to support.
Question number 2, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to improve access to public transport for people with mobility issues.
Minister Keith Brown.
The Scottish Government is working in partnership with the Department for Transport to improve access to Scotland's rail network for everyone, and that includes the £41 million Access for All Fund, which is supporting the upgrading of 19 stations in Scotland to bring them up to the modern, accessible standards that we expect. The Scottish Government is also committed to encouraging bus operators to meet the Public Services Vehicles Accessibility Regulations 2000 that require buses to be fully accessible. And the Scottish Government also sponsors the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland, MACS, who continue to promote the travel needs of disabled people directly with transport planners, operators and infrastructure providers.
Rhoda Grant.
I thank the Minister for his response. I have been contacted by a number of constituents regarding the lack of wheelchair accessible taxis in Highlands, and also with regard to access for buses. The lack of taxis means that people who use wheelchairs can't very easily socialise together. Buses are only able to take one wheelchair, and if that space is used by parents with prams and pushchairs, that wheelchair user can't get on, so therefore it can only be used by parents or indeed one wheelchair user at a time. One of the issues brought to me is the cost of changing to accessible taxis. What incentives can the Scottish Government give to taxi drivers to improve their vehicles to allow them to be accessible for wheelchair users?
Minister.
Well, can I say I think much of the regulation in relation to taxis is devolved to local government through the Civic Government Scotland Act and subsequent amendments to that. And it's also true to say that disability legislation with regard to buses and coaches in the early part of the member's question is reserved to the UK Parliament. But if the member wants to write to me in the detail of that, and if there is any possibility of further assistance that can be offered, I'm more than happy to look at that.
Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if the Minister would recognise with me that whilst very often the theory is excellent, the practice can be a very different thing. And certainly as far as buses are concerned, I'm finding in my own constituency that people with disabilities sometimes have issues about getting on buses. Sometimes it's in relation to how helpful the drivers wish to be, for example. Sometimes it's about other passengers not being willing to fold pushchairs, stuff like that. I wonder if he thinks it would be a good idea to ask operators and providers to have an awareness campaign amongst their staff and to the general public about the needs of people with disabilities and their rights in relation to buses and trains.
Minister.
I'm certainly happy to incorporate that in the regular dialogue that we have with bus operators. Just maybe worth clarifying, though, the fact that this is a staged process. So all new buses since 31st December 2000 have had to be accessible. All single-decker buses must be accessible by the 1st of January 2016, and all double-decker buses by the 1st of January 2017. All coaches by the 1st of January 2020. As I think this timetable set out by Westminster, but if there are particular issues, especially in relation to the cooperation of drivers, as I say, I'm happy to incorporate that in the dialogue that we have with operators.
Jackie Bailey.
I hope the Minister is aware of the Hubs campaign launched by young members of Enable Scotland. They've lodged a petition before the Parliament about reducing the notice period for disabled passengers travelling by train. Can I ask the Minister what more he can do to make freedom of travel a reality and assist disabled people to live an independent life?
Minister.
Well, first of all, I could say that the Enable Scotland will meet with Transport Scotland to discuss the issues raised in further detail. But it is worth acknowledging the fact that the Scottish Government, with ScotRail, has already worked to ensure that we don't have the same advance period, 24 hours, which is the norm across the rest of the UK. That's now been reduced to 4 hours. That can still be an issue for some people. And, of course, the new franchise allows us to encourage bidders to come forward and say they can improve that even further. So we are aware of the campaign, a very good campaign, and we are going to engage with those behind the campaign as well.
Question number 3, Jim Hume.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what factors it takes into consideration when deciding which stretches of trunk road are appropriate for dualling.
Minister Keith Brown.
A range of factors, including traffic flows, safety, environmental and economic impacts, are considered when deciding infrastructure priorities, including dualling of stretches of the trunk road.
Jim Hume.
I thank the Minister for that response. Accidents are 3 times more likely to occur on the single carriageway sections of the A1 than the dual carriageway section. I recently attended the inaugural meeting of the Scottish A1 Action Group and discussed the compelling business and safety case for dualling of the A1 from the English border to Dunbar. Will the Minister today join the growing consensus, which includes Scottish Borders and East Lothian councils and local businesses, and mirror the UK Government by commissioning a feasibility study to look into dualling the A1 on our side of the border?
Minister.
I suppose the first point to make is to ask why, if it was so important, the previous administration never looked at this during all the time that they had to do this. We have looked at this, and I would repeat the previous response I've given to the member that we have no plans for dualling the A1. He requested an update of these plans in view of a report that the UK Government were set to approve an upgrade of the A1. That's not the case. As the members rightly said, all they've said is that they will have a feasibility study in relation to that. But we believe the A1 in Scotland, which is nearly all dualled, enjoys relatively safe, efficient transport operations and experiences few journey time reliability issues, despite some, which I will acknowledge, capacity constraints and congestion points. And also we have in place a route management strategy and measures on the A1 to maintain the route's physical condition and the safety standards. We do not intend to fully dual that road.
Question number 4, Linda Fabiani.
To ask the Scottish Government when it last met representatives of South Lanarkshire College and what issues were discussed.
Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, my officials met the Principal of South Lanarkshire College earlier this week to discuss our recently published consultation paper about the implementation of the Post-16 Education Scotland Act 2013. Among the issues addressed by the consultation are the future regional arrangements for all the Lanarkshire colleges.
Linda Fabiani.
Can I say, first of all, there seemed to be a problem with the microphone because I barely heard a word of what the Cabinet Secretary said. I will assume that it was very positive in relation to my local college. And can I ask him if he is aware of the excellent work that South Lanarkshire College is carrying out at the moment on youth employment in relation to certificates of work readiness in conjunction with employers such as Burn Stewart? And will he commend that and also recognise the strategic importance of South Lanarkshire College to the county and, of course, to East Kilbride as a member of East Kilbride's task force?
Let's try again, Cabinet Secretary.
It is uncommon, Presiding Officer, for me not to be heard, I have to say, as you know.
I did answer the question very positively indeed. I pointed out that my officials had met the Principal of South Lanarkshire College earlier this week to discuss the consultation paper published about the future of the Regional College in Lanarkshire. I am well aware of the quality of the work undertaken in South Lanarkshire College, and I commend the Principal and the staff. It is a high-achieving college, and there are a great many important links that the college has with local employers. The purpose of regionalisation, of course, is to strengthen that type of performance, to make sure that there is a strategic view taken across the region, and to make sure that the interaction between the regions works well for Scotland's learners as well as for Scotland's economy. And I'm quite sure that South Lanarkshire College, in either of the iterations that are being proposed in the consultation proposal, will do that. And now we need to have the conversation with the colleges in South Lanarkshire and with others about how we take this issue forward.
Question 5, James Donnan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the 2014 year of homecoming.
Minister, Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, planning for homecoming is progressing well, and the year-long programme of events planned across the whole country will celebrate the very best of Scotland's food and drink, our assets as a country of natural beauty, as well as our rich creativity and cultural and ancestral heritage.
James Donnan.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The Minister will have noted that Scotland was recently named one of the best places to visit next year by the Lonely Planet Guide. I'm currently working with local organisations to see what we can do to highlight all the south side of Glasgow has to offer tourists and residents in the run-up to the Commonwealth Games and beyond. Does the Minister agree with me that 2014 in homecoming offers a unique opportunity for tourists, but also for locals to learn more about the oft-forgotten gems on their doorstep?
Minister.
Well, yes, I do. I was delighted that Lonely Planets adjudged Scotland to be in the top 3 countries in the world to visit, along with Brazil and Antarctica. So a mixed bag there, Presiding Officer. And yes, I entirely agree that the Year of the Homecoming is an excellent opportunity for people throughout Scotland to celebrate our many attractions. And I'm delighted that there are currently funded or partner events in all local authority areas, and the Homecoming Scotland 2014 programme currently includes 241 events. Presiding Officer, in 2014, Scotland will be on the world stage as never before, so we should all celebrate it together.
Question number 6, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what representations it has received regarding the rollout of high-speed broadband services in Orkney.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Recent representations have been received by the Scottish Government regarding the rollout of next-generation broadband services in Orkney. The Scottish Government and its partners are investing over £280 million in our Step Change programme, which alongside commercial deployment will deliver next-generation broadband access to 95% of premises in Scotland by 2017-18. The programme will deliver significant improvements to Orkney, with coverage of at least 75% of premises expected by 2016. No commercial rollout was planned in Orkney, which demonstrates the transformational impact the public sector investment will have on the island.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his helpful response? Following the announcement last month of the rollout in the Inner Murray Firth area, can he perhaps advise when we will see similar announcements with respect to sites in Orkney benefiting from the broadband investment provided by the UK, Scottish Governments and their partners? Can he also confirm that he expects High and BT to be engaging with community groups about how remaining gaps might be filled, possibly drawing on some of the funding available? And finally, will he agree to make representations to SSE to ensure that any cable laying that they are undertaking, including in Orkney, includes fibre as a matter of course, unless there are compelling reasons to do otherwise?
Cabinet Secretary.
On the final point that Mr MacArthur raises, I think there is a really very compelling argument for the point that he makes, that when cabling activity has been undertaken by one of the utilities providers, there is an opportunity to take forward in a practical sense the rollout of fibre connections. So I will undertake to take that point forward. In relation to the timetable for further rollout announcements, the announcement on the Inner Murray Firth area was made on the 15th of October. Further rollout plans will be announced in phases, and I certainly can assure Mr MacArthur that the Government will be asking HIE and BT to actively discuss with communities how we can practically enhance the arrangements that have been taken forward to maximise the effectiveness of what's a significant investment in the connectivity, a necessary investment, I might add, in the connectivity of the island communities that Mr MacArthur represents.
Question number 7, Mary Fee.
To ask the Scottish Government how the Help to Buy Scotland shared equity scheme will stimulate the house building industry and help people become homeowners.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is taking action to stimulate the housing market through the £220 million Help to Buy Scotland scheme. This can help more people, including first and second-time home buyers, to meet their home ownership aspirations by supporting them to access the market. The scheme is intended to support demand, stimulate further construction by the industry and to support employment. In a survey carried out in April 2013, Homes for Scotland forecast the scheme to stimulate a net increase in total housing output by 10% over a 3-year period, equivalent to approximately 3,000 additional homes.
Mary Fee.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. However, with the Help to Buy scheme in England pushing house prices up, and in light of the housing crisis we have in Scotland, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the Help to Buy scheme could make it harder for new first-time buyers over the medium to long term?
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't agree with the concluding point that Mary Fee made. What we are trying to do by a range of different measures, whether it's about the Help to Buy scheme that we have here, or whether it's the focus of the land and buildings transaction tax that the Government proposed and which Parliament has endorsed to essentially provide greater support to first-time buyers to enter the market. These are all measures which are designed to assist people to own their own homes for the first time. In relation to the wider debate, of course, the Government has given emphatic support to investment in housing provision in Scotland. In the course of the 3 years up to 2014-15, we plan to invest £970 million in affordable housing, which will make a very significant contribution to tackling the major issues that exist in relation to the availability of housing that meets the needs of individuals within Scotland.
Question number 8, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason the Procurement-Reform Bill does not refer to the living wage.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, EU law precludes making payment of a living wage a requirement of a procurement process. The Procurement-Reform Bill will allow ministers to issue statutory guidance on how workforce-related matters, such as a company's approach to recruitment and terms of engagement, should be considered when assessing the suitability of a company to bid for public contracts.
The Minister will be aware that this is Living Wage Week and campaigners are today outside the Parliament lobbying the Parliament. In addition to asking for amendments to the bill, they are also asking, will the Scottish Government set up a Scottish Living Wage unit? Will the Scottish Government convene a Living Wage summit with COSLA? Will the Scottish Government issue guidance with the bill to public bodies outlining steps that can be taken to deliver the living wage through procurement? I've signed up to these pledges. Can the Minister give an indication whether he is supporting these pledges as well?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the points that Mr Bibby raises, and as the Finance Minister in a government that applied the living wage to the public sector pay policy over which we preside, I'm very proud of the commitment that the government has given in this respect. There are, as I think Mr Bibby would acknowledge, and which I think is widely acknowledged in this debate, some very significant practical and legal issues that restrict our ability to ensure that to oblige contractors to pay the living wage as a result of the constraints that I talked about in relation to the European Union's position. But I would want to make it clear in Scottish Living Wage Week the strong and emphatic support of the Scottish Government for the application of the living wage. We are leading by example, and we look to other organisations to follow our example.
Question 9, Michael McMahon.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what it considers the adverse environmental impacts are of pyrolysis incinerators.
Cabinet Secretary Richard Lockhead.
The European Waste Incineration Directive imposes stringent emission standards and controls on pyrolysis and other thermal treatment facilities. Before any new plant can begin operations, it must obtain a pollution prevention and control permit from SEPA. And in order to obtain this permit, an operator has to be required to undertake a detailed environmental risk assessment to demonstrate that there will be no negative impact on the environment. And of course, SEPA have a range of regulatory enforcement tools available to them to deal with each application.
Michael McMahon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. Will the Cabinet Secretary, though, agree with me that we need some consistency when applications are put forward in relation to pyrolysis incinerators, because we have a series of these plants being located in communities right across Scotland at the present time. And when you have colleagues of his campaigning in Perth on the basis that there are pollutant belching monstrosities being proposed in their area, but those same pyrolysis incinerators are being agreed in Carnbrough and Dovedale and Lanarkshire, that there is an inconsistency that has to be addressed in this planning process.
Cabinet Secretary.
I do, of course, recognise the concerns expressed by communities, but there is a robust planning regime in place and an environmental regime as well, and each application must be treated on its merits. And, of course, as the member's own question illustrates, there are examples of applications being refused by the authorities. So the system is robust, and the circumstances of each application